Hey guys, Thomas the Genie here, aka Mustached, here to review the movie Orion in the Dark. If you end up enjoying this full movie review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers, second and third to my Patreon and PayPal where you can help support me and my channel. And fourth to my Discord server where you can join, collab, chill, do all that cool stuff for free, and chilling will be reminded at the end of the review. With all that out of the way, let us get into Orion and the Dark. So I have not seen any trailers for this movie, and this almost didn't even seem like a DreamWorks movie, considering after Puss in Boots: The Last Wish put DreamWorks on the scale of holy shit, they are actually stepping up their game by a grand total of amazing. But unfortunately, Orion in the Dark does have quite a little bit of issues. Now, when I just googled this to get this thumbnail, I saw that some of the images were of a book, so I'm going to assume that this is based off of a book. Though that relevancy is not so important, as we are here to look at it as an independent movie as objectively as conceivable. And with that, let's get into it. So, the movie opens up with our main character, his name is, yes, literally Orion, who obsesses over the many, many, many things that he is afraid of. Or even potentially has a phobia of. The distinction between the two kind of crosses in between his rationale or irrationality behind each of those things that he lists. And by goodness, this goes on for a long, long bit. Like, there's like 3 different segments back to back to back of narration. Just give me a second here, I'm just doing something. Back to back of narration of him, of being like, I'm afraid of this list of things. And then an event will happen, like say he's getting ready to go to school, he sees a girl that he has a young crush on, because that's a thing that can happen, believe it or not. I know, right? But, of course, the impotence of the fears that we have been seeing kind of goes into a whole different list of all these different things that relate to either her or things around the school. And the last segment of these fears revolve around him going on this field trip. Despite one of the last moments that we see with him and the young girl, named Sally, by the way, just so we know her name, that the many fears come from what could happen on this school trip, and they continue on and on and on. So this bit does make the pacing already seem a little bit stretched out, meaning that I think we really only needed one segment of this whole spiel, because there's a lot to cover with the main sort of crux of the story. So the setup could have easily just been easily established by having one set of fears and then just having a decently long list, because even that first initial list was of that type, and leave it at that. You could have seriously left it at that. Canceled out maybe even the first set of fears, instead of, like, you already see him heading to school or whatever. And we just have those 2 blocks, and then sort of combine them in a way that makes sense in terms of the writing. Whichever way you want to go about doing it, it's already much better than getting 3 different segments about fear and having the pacing already be sacrificed in the opening of the movie. Because we're already off to a pretty rocky start, all things considered. Now, Upon this, when he returns home, uh, not having his permission slip, so he feels a little bit safer at least. He goes home, he sees that the parents have it, and they give it to him, they sign it, and then they're like, it's back on or whatever. So that night, he's like, I'll leave the door open, because of course, the main event, he's scared of the dark. Now, quite frankly, yes, you could also open the movie here too as well. That's just the thing. You could open the fear here, but there are some things that the whole fear list that's set up in the beginning that does have some sort of payoff later on. So I guess like having some of those would be worth it if that was the point of those. So anyway, so he's freaking out because the lights go out, and we get references to a really old movie, and I'm blanking on the name. I think it's Poltergeist that they're making a reference to here, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a while since I've seen the original Poltergeist, where they have certain shots of the tree scraping against the windows, and like the thing sitting at the windowsill moving or seeming to move or whatever, seeing symbolism there. So I'm pretty sure that's a reference to Poltergeist. I think. I'm fairly certain. Anyway, moving along. So he's freaking out as we see this shadowy figure form, and lo and behold, we eventually find out that this is Dark. And yes, that's just his name, also simultaneously Dark. The thing that's holding him, Orion, that boy in the poster, here in the image. So, of course, we have him freaking out, and Dark is trying to talk to him about, like, oh, I have this long list of kids who are afraid of me, the Dark. And he shows off this list. He shows how incredibly, like, high it is, and, like, how annoyed he is by this kid in particular being one of the worst examples of this, of being afraid of the dark. So we get our message of the movie fairly early on, even before we meet Dark. It's right before he actually heads to bed. We hear the mom say, essentially, I'm going to paraphrase here, about like, it's okay to be afraid of something, but it's all about going through it anyway. Essentially, if you were to sum that all up in one word, it's literally bravery. That's where bravery, the essence of bravery, comes from, like, legitimately. It actually comes from being fearful first, and then finding a bravery. That is how that concept actually works. I am a little bit tired of people just saying a thing is brave on its own. I mean, technically speaking, that is how we use it now too. But in terms of like where that actually comes from, again, that actually did come from, like, you had to be the thing first, fearful first, and then bravery, going through the thing would be the outcome usually beforehand. Anyway, so that's basically the theme of the entire movie, spelled out to us pretty early on, but he's not accepting of the themes right now. So Dark says that he's going to take Orion with him through the night shift and show him the many reasons why the night or the dark are pretty cool or whatever. So they spend the first night meeting these other characters you can see beneath them. These little, I guess I'll call them spirits. I actually don't remember what they're called as a group, but these little spirits, as they appear to be are like these different representations of things that happen during the night. Sleepiness being the blue one, quiet being the white little spirit there, the purple one being sweet dreams, and then the two on the left being yellow being mysterious noises, and the green one being insomnia. So we have a bit of a mix here of certain positive things, the ones on the right, and then the ones that could lead to negativity or a negative outcome are the ones on the left there. But Orion kind of goes through the motions of hanging out with each of them individually, with Dark as a sort of a chaperone, as it were. As with each one, he finds a way to screw up each of their jobs, as it were. He's seeing what they're doing. They have different representations, for example, sleep, of how to get someone to sleep. She has various ways of getting individuals to sleep, so he's freaking out about it, and then she's like, oh geez, I can't do my job if you're doing all that now. And and then we go through the rigmarole of doing all the rest of them in the same fashion. And I believe the last set of them are sweet dreams. He was getting pretty desperate. The Dark was, but through that night, we also see the essence or light, the beginning of light or daytime. But Dark hides Orion, away for the first time. But anyways, getting back to Sweet Dreams, we have this whole segment where they enter one of the dreams of this woman, some random woman teacher. I'm not sure if that's related to anything, but he sort of takes over the dream, as it were, by saying a bunch of things through that setup of all the fears that he had earlier on in the movie, and those come to exist within the context of said dream, turning it into a nightmare, for him at least. So he thinks of his bully, and so on and so forth, and this is the first time they mentioned how he can die from this, which, okay, but anyway, they get him out he gets himself out with the others pretty easily, I guess, all things considered. And then the movie, after the segment of this night passing, as it were, the movie takes what I can only consider as a extremely bizarre twist, or I'm gonna say that now, is that we actually, this earlier on in the movie, we actually skip ahead a number of years. In fact, in this fast forward, as it were, we see Orion as an adult, and he's talking to his daughter about being, she's afraid of the dark or whatever. And I will say, I think this is actually where the movie begins to fall apart completely, unfortunately. I think the movie is losing its focus simply by jumping ahead distinctly of, because the movie's called Orion. I mean technically we are still technically following Orion, but the shift is focusing now too on this new character being his daughter. And I believe I don't remember her name exactly. She has a bizarre name, but it's based on the stars as well. Just like Orion, his name is based on Orion's belt, obviously. That's the point. But anyway, focusing on, so we have a whole segment here where he's talking to her about this whole thing that we've been seeing previously. It's all been a story. that's now the new context of the entire movie, is that every time we're in the flashback, or what I was perceiving to be the current reality of the movie is just a flashback now. We're recontextualizing the entire movie. This is why doing this is not a great idea. And by the way, just to say it now, it happens again. I'm not joking. It seriously happens again, and the reason I'm riffing a little bit here is because my notes are locked away, unfortunately. I saved them in the wrong format by accident. Anyway, so we have such a weird situation now where we have to recontextualize everything that is happening to Orion as a kid is just a flashback now. But okay, we'll deal with that as it happens. So we do head back, following him on the next night, as it were, and we see that he's getting better with it, helping now the other spirits, as it were, assisting them in their ways of the night, and including Dark himself. However, at some point in this juncture, she interrupts the story as it's happening, so now we're getting that too, to say that she is kind of feeling like the story is going to have too much of a simple ending. I think Disney was trying, and the writers specifically of this movie were trying to call out certain critics that say, simplicity is sometimes can be really effective in a story, it turns out. I almost feel like that's the case here. I don't know why. It almost feels like the writing there was meant to be like, see, critics, we can make something complicated look. Like, that's what it feels like this movie is trying to do at this point already. So yeah. So he's like, okay, we'll make it more complex. So he re-enters the story, and then they're getting ready to take a landing for a break or whatever, and they're about to enter this super dark house, and then his fears suddenly break back up. So he's like, yeah, I'm not doing that specifically, even though the rest of them are heading in there. So he's like, So he gets the others to come back out. He begins to explain, Dark is still in there, by the way. He begins to explain to all the other ones that, Dark isn't, it's a little bit of the issue, as it were. And so this depresses Dark when he does come back and he hears this. So much so that when he begins carrying the boy later on, he just stops. He stops and he waits. He's like, and by the way, the context for this is that we were told even earlier on in the movie, when we first saw the glimpse of the light, is that if the two ever met, that the night would be erased forever. And that's already something I have an issue with, actually. In its present, as it's presented, did the writers forget that there's a thing in real life called an eclipse? Like, seriously, did they forget eclipses are a thing that can happen? There are two types of eclipses. There's what I was thinking was going to happen, a solar eclipse, being, I think that just means the sun is quote-unquote in front of the moon as far as we're seeing it. And then the lunar eclipse would be the moon is what's in front of the sun, in terms of, again, how we're seeing it. So I thought a solar eclipse is where we were going, and quite frankly, I think that would have been the preferred method instead of where we end up going, because where we end up going is a fucking whole different direction that just is like, okay, we're just going here now kind of vibes. This could have been an opportunity instead to present Light as a good character. Because so far, he's just been kind of just like, whatever, happy days to all of you, but, you're kind of lame, Dark. That's kind of like just sort of how he's been behaving, at least how we've been perceiving him thus far. So having the two have the eclipse, that short brief exchange where they would pass each other by like that, to actually get a good moment with Light and Dark actually being able to talk to one another directly, instead of what actually ends up happening, which is the Light passes the Dark and then the Dark vanishes into nothingness. What? That is what happens in the movie. And furthermore, he was on top of a flying turtle. What? So yeah, the movie is just throwing things at us now. And again, I get that it's meant to be a story, but it's still like, come on, you can do a little bit better than this in terms of the writing. I saw The Last Wish. I know you can do this. This is DreamWorks. You just had a super successful movie, and now you're gonna pull this on us. It's like, come on, I have to criticize it. You can't get away with this now. So yeah, it takes a completely different turn. Incredibly so. So he ends up on the turtle, floating away on this island. And then he just ends the story. So now we're back in the present. And the girl's like upset because they're like walking. And they, instead of going down a park where it's like super dark, they end up taking another path. And they end up in this like auditorium, this like space one where he works apparently. And he's like, that's the end of the story. And she's like, what? No. So the story is about to get a lot weirder in the context of, yes, we're going here now. So she enters herself into the story / flashback. So now we have that element to contend with. And she explains that she wrote this poem about the dark. And begins to read it. And in reading it, I guess that somehow just gets all the other spirits back, I guess. I guess that's just how that works. I don't know. So they're all back now. But the only one that's still missing is Dark. And the only one who can remember Dark is Orion. So they have to put Orion to sleep in his flashback. I don't know. And then, in it, he recontextualizes Dark, so he's able to reappear. However, what ends up happening is, like, his closet ends up opening, and then on the other side of it is, like, this dark hole. This abyss, as it were. And even Dark is getting sucked into this, well, dark hole. And we see other things, like all the fears, the papers that he was drawing in, get, like, sucked into this black hole and then evaporate. So, taking a little note from Toy Story 3, I see, when they're in the pit. It's essentially the same, except the drama just isn't quite there at all. I'm being, like, seriously, they did not set this up as well here. And so, we get the recontextualization of Orion remembering the thing that his mom said about the whole being brave, essentially, again, just shortening the theme here. And then he decides to go forth into this void and go towards darkness, who's being sucked into the dark hole. So he's pulling away, and his daughter, who is also appearing young in the dream, and one other, Sweet Dreams, is there, the purple one there, is also there, holding on to this rope that they just have, I guess. So they, once he grabs Dark, they're trying to wake him up instead of him lingering into this dark void. So he wakes up with Dark in tow when he wakes up with Dark. And so the two are able to head back home. However, the movie is not over. We have another twist, believe it or not. Yes, I wish I were joking, but I'm not. Because we have another fast forward. I wish I were joking, but that's just what happens in the movie. So we fast forward again to the future of the future. Now the girl is the one who's telling the story to her son about the darkness and whatever. And now he's recontextualizing this secondary story, which was his story originally by Orion, and now it's being finished by a third generation. And the way he ends it, and I'm not joking, is time travel. I wish I were joking, but yeah, we're introduced abruptly to a new character named Tyler, I think, if I remember that right. Again, I don't even have my notes on me. And this Tyler character just has a machine, and there are all these purple monsters, and it's all like, what is happening? Like, what, like, seriously, like, none of this is just flowing. And then he, like, takes the girl into the time machine to fast forward her to her current reality, which is beyond the point she would be at to get to the present of the timeline. And we end with Orion, back outside, super old, and looking up at the stars, and his wife, presumably the same girl that he was next to, because we see a flashback of him sitting with the girl when they're going on that field trip in the Emporium or whatever, and them sitting together in both iterations of future, and past. And that was Orion in the Dark. And by God, was this a sloppy movie. I am baffled how far DreamWorks fell within the context of this movie. Like, seriously, you could have trimmed a lot of fat here at the beginning, first and foremost. I've said that already. There's a lot of fat about how many fears this kid has. Like, you went for 3 different segments of it. Unnecessary. Like, you only needed one list. We could start by cutting that fat out, right? Secondly, if I were the one writing this, I would have just kept it in the context of just Orion. None of this future flinging bullshit that we see throughout the rest of the movie. All of that stuff is just like, it hurts the movie in terms of the context of, like, we're trying to impart that we are in this moment consistently with Orion, instead of us believing that we were with Orion until we recontextualize it and saying, oh, Orion's actually telling a story as a father. Like, that entire bit just feels so unnecessary. So much of this movie would have to be rewritten, unfortunately. But it's true. Like, how else can you fix this movie? It doesn't have a focus. It's unfocused. It's all over the place. it has literally 3 different segments of 3 different points of life with 3 different contextualizations of who's telling said story. That is so unorganized inherently. I would hope that people would understand that. I mean, what is the point then of calling it Orion in the Dark instead of Family in the Dark? I don't know, something to be like, we're gonna focus on the family aspect. I don't know. But yeah, there's that. Yeah, and then the whole thing with the eclipse, I think that could have really helped contextualize a lot of the movie, or a lot of Orion's perspective with light and dark specifically, like getting to actually interact instead of, again, what ends up happening in the movie. I mean, again, here's another thing I would have fixed, is that, like, what you could have done was broken up the fears in terms of, like, smaller segments instead of, like, super condensing it into this long diatribe about the fears. Instead of, we get the fear from time to time throughout the movie, but we're always in the context of Orion's perspective. Even when he's, like, avoiding Sally, right? Like, let's focus on that. Like, have Sally be a little bit more of a character here, instead of she kind of gets lost the moment after she says hi and wants him to go to this, trip. We have him walk away from her, not saying anything, being all introverted and fearful of stuff. So we can insert a fear here, right, if we're rewriting this, of like, okay, like, what if I had done this? And then we contextualize this one fear, and then we move on to, like, the next segment, right? Of, like, he's at home, and maybe he's gonna even sit on that fear instead of, like, abandoning it, like, really, like, you can expand upon it that way instead of, like, listing a diatribe of fears. Like, you can double dip a little bit here and have it not feel like the pacing is necessarily, like, bloated like a balloon, as it were. And then, essentially, he's, like, dreaming, and then, within that context, now you can correlate the thing he was just being afraid of in his dream. Like, keep that all in one context, and then we see dark or whatever, because that's when he first appears. And we can keep we can really keep the focus on his interaction with her, like, really, really focus in on that, because I feel like they really lose the plot with it. Like, the end of the movie should have been we fast forward, instead of, like, it being, like, in the second, like, within, like, I don't know, like, how long it is until it happens. It's like it's like 10 minutes, I want to say. I forget how long the diatribe is. Like, I think it feels like longer than 10 minutes, maybe. Maybe it's like 15 or even 20. I wouldn't be surprised. It is a long list, if that did not come across. So yeah, recontextualizing it through her being like this sort of representation of the dark or whatever, like this mysterious girl, right? The moon, very feminine, right? There's a lot you can do with that in terms of how you present your story. Even the way she looks, right? Have her with a lot of darker colors, dark blue, stuff like that. Again, visual storytelling on top of what is actually happening. and keeping it all contextualized. So now when they're traveling with Dark, Orion is, they can stay a lot more focused on who is this girl, and they can talk back and forth about it. He can talk it now, and again, we have another breadth of opportunity for him to expand upon those earlier fears. Instead of them all being bloated in one place, we can fan them out throughout the narrative to make it way more cohesive instead of all clumped together necessarily, to have a way better rhythm in terms of pacing, in terms of how you're writing it. So they're flying together. I'm not sure how much you need of the other little moments, the other elements here that we see below him. If it were up to me, would I do the whole he's ruining their jobs? It feels like that kind of correlates to the whole sun bit, right? I feel like all of those characters are actually unnecessary for the story to fit. Have him, Dark, be the only character that Orion is interacting with in the nighttime. I think consolidating all of that to being his job, all of it, be focused on him. I think that recontextualization of Dark would make way more. It makes him a way more interesting character if, instead of having all these separate characters, you all integrate it into him. He's the one responsible for having sweet dreams and sleeping in the quiet, but he can also simultaneously be a little bit of a troll from time to time with the quiet, with the loud noises and all that. You can all contextualize all the different lower spirits into him without it feeling like it's out of character. I think there's a way of doing that really beautifully, and it makes his character just that more interesting. So we have them hanging out at night. It's just the two of them now, and he's super freaked out, and we have him saying all this stuff about the girl. You can try at just saying hi and then walking away, baby step, right? A little jab, right? Get him moving in the right direction. I don't know, something along those lines, to show that Dark is actually trying to communicate with Orion in that way. And then we learn about Light here. I do think that having Light here, contextualizing him as the only other character we see outside of Dark, can fit within the narrative that I'm rebuilding to fix this entire script, quite frankly, at this point. So we see the Light coming, and Orion, again, even visually storytelling, right? Orion, he's in the movie, he's dressed in a blue shirt. Again, you could more visual storytelling here. You could have had him wear bright colors, like a yellow shirt instead. Very, very bright in terms of that is the consistent color we see him in throughout the entire movie. And so yeah, we see how you know what, and to correlate Dark between Orion is we actually have Dark be the one afraid of Light. That's how you fix it. That is how you fix the story. He doesn't understand the eclipse yet. It hasn't happened in a long time. He's forgot about it or something, right? In his lifetime. So he's afraid of the Light. A fear of the Light. That is how you fix the narrative. And you make it very, very clear that it's not he'll just vanish. No, we're gonna get rid of that. He doesn't understand what the eclipse is anymore, so he assumes that he'll disappear, sure, but that's not what's going to end up happening instead. So that is way more stronger in terms of a narrative In fact, we can see his motions differ, have him shaking at the idea of light instead of like just blocking him, Orion, from the light. Like having him shiver, having him be like, get it, let's get a move on, we gotta move. You know, have his actual personality shift to match what is happening with that fear that we see Orion has been having throughout the movie, except for the exception of light. And so now Orion can see someone else having fears, and now we have two different characters having, well, opposing fears. And now we can actually have Orion start to talk to, Dark and say, you don't have to be afraid of the light. And, he's actually saying these things pretty confidently. So now we have a back and forth about, how Dark was, earlier on in that nighttime shift, about like what Orion was afraid of all that time, all of the things that we could have sprinkled throughout the movie, and now we shift into this, this fear of the light, the daytime, all the noisiness, that the busyness of light, what day brings, all that stuff. You can have Dark be afraid of all that stuff. All this busy work, as it were. You can go on for a bit about a few things, I'm sure, if you're, again, competent at writing. And, now you have this solid, way more solid back and forth between the two. And you never introduce any of the other elements. You all have them within Dark as one singular character. I feel like that helps with the amount of characters on screen. It helps focus the narrative between the two characters that need the most focus, that being Orion and Dark. You have just enough about information about light from Dark's perspective, and we also have enough information about Sally from Orion's perspective, because he's been talking about her specifically through his fears. Like, have them be slightly more attached than completely detached. Otherwise, they would be phobias, which some of them are in the way that it's written in this movie. And if you don't know the difference between a fear and a phobia is something you can rationalize. A phobia is something that is irrational. The explanation of said fear, the rationing behind it, doesn't make any logical sense. So, for example, transphobia, like the way certain conservatives talk about spreading transphobia, because you can spread it too, is saying a phrase like social contagion. Why is that spreading transphobia? Because the word contagion, when you perceive it, hear it, you think of contagion. That sounds like a virus. That sounds like, a disease, something that can kill me. That is how you spread a transphobia, literally. In its literal context, that is literally how you do it, in one sentence. I did it, you guys. I did it. I know. Crazy, right? So that's the difference between fear and phobia. So we have, again, some fears that this kid can explore about just talking to her and messing up, which he can rationalize, like, or even irrationalize. It can go either way, really. It doesn't really matter, as long as it's one of those. And then again, context with how he's approaching Dark with that information. And then, again, we flip the narrative to Dark being afraid of light. Now we have that conversation and why he's so afraid of light. And now we have Orion being the one who can comfort Dark, tell Dark to just say hi. So now we have that complete flip. Because earlier in the script that I'm completely rewriting for this movie here, I just said earlier that Dark, that Orion should tell Sally just to say hi, that baby step. So we have that baby step now being completely flipped here for light. Just say hi, right? Even if it's at a distance, right? Because, you know, keep the separation until the eclipse happens at the end, like right close to the end of the movie. Because that could be like, you have that conflation, and then the next morning, when you have that at the tail end, right after that, you have Orion meeting with Sally, and just as they say hi, and now they're meeting, they go on the bus to their field trip, and then we skip ahead to the fast forward of them being older, and that's how you end the movie. Like, there you go. I did it. I fixed your movie, DreamWorks. There you go. I'm pretty sure you can like fill a little bit more of that in, but that's the general gist of how I would fix this movie. As is, this movie is far too messy. This is a 3 out of 10 as it is right now. This movie is far too clumped, far too messy, has far too many fast forwards and nonsense of time travel and all this bullshit that has nothing to do with fear. Like, unless he had said he had a fear of time travel, which he never actually did in the entire script, I know. And like, it seriously just comes out of nowhere. And again, it's a 2-generation gap apart of characters that we're dealing with there too, on top of what I just said. So this is an easy 3 out of 10. This is a complete mess. It definitely needed to be reworked. And that is my review, or rant, of Orion in the Dark. If you ended up enjoying it, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description when I head over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers. Second and third to my Patreon and PayPal, where you can help support me and my channel. And fourth to my Discord server, where you can join, collab, chill, do all that cool stuff for free. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye.